I'm Angela Eagle, I'm the Labour MP for Wallasey.
You've just written a book, The New Serfdom. What conservative ideas are you attacking in the book?
Well, the idea of the book is that it demonstrates the often hidden influence of a philosopher and economist called Friedrich Hayek, who was Mrs. Thatcher's guru, who decided that really the only way of making any decision in any country was to use the price mechanism if you were to preserve liberty. And he had a very extreme view of what I've called market fundamentalism, which has come to be the dominant idea in the way our economy has developed since Mrs. Thatcher's time. And I think it's actually led to a different kind of serfdom than the one he was warning about in the 1940s.
So why is this influence hidden?
Because I think it's become all pervasive, and a lot of the assumptions that Mrs. Thatcher kind of injected into the way that we do things in politics have just become accepted. And actually these ideas, when you examine them, are completely ludicrous, and some of them are even offensive. So the price mechanism doesn't work in many instances. For example, it has nothing to say about the needs or requirements of anyone who doesn't have any money, because their needs just aren't taken account of in any market. Markets fail in many ways. One of the other things that Friedrich Hayek felt you needed in a society was really that to recognise that people were motivated by their own selfishness and greed, effectively, and to maximise their own utility, and that if everybody did that, then that would provide the best solution to any system. Well, actually, as a democratic socialist, I believe that that's not true, that people are also altruistic, and there are collective beliefs and goods in society that I want to see provided for everybody. So I don't think I've spent my life just being sort of motivated by my own selfish greed. In fact, I think a lot of people in society give back to others, and they empathise and identify with others. Friedrich Hayek also really was asserting that for a society to work properly and for markets to work properly, it had to be unequal, so that those who were much poorer would strive and work harder. Again, I think that this is a profoundly wrong and immoral way of looking at things. And so the book is about how those ideas have almost become like wallpaper, the background against which every other decision is made. And what I'm saying is we should look at these ideas for what they are and see how much they've ruined our world. That market fundamentalist ideas don't take account of social justice, they don't bring about inclusive growth, which includes everybody, and they certainly don't do a lot to ensure that the growth that we have is sustainable in environmental terms. So it's time to move on.
So he was fighting against one type of serfdom, you said?
Yes, his book was called The Road to Serfdom, and it was written in 1943. It's a very famous rant against socialism of any kind, and he thought that Clement Attlee was the most appalling person, and he saw that the collective work that was going on to fight Hitler during the Second World War, and thought that this would lead to serfdom. And my arguments are that the values that he set out in his book, which have been put into effect by Margaret Thatcher and not mitigated enough subsequently, have actually led to a different kind of serfdom in our labour market, where people are expected to work for very low pay, creating a society where we've got food banks and where we can't just satisfy the basic necessities for a lot of our people, for example, for housing, for access to food, and all of those things.
So does that mean that because you've talked about the fundamentalism of economic theory, and often the conservatives present themselves as the only people who can run the economy.
And they also present these ideas as if they're some kind of natural law. And I'm saying, actually, no, we can make different choices that are more collective. And actually, democratic socialism gives us different sorts of values. And so the values I set out for a different sort of society, a democratic socialist society, are democracy, liberty, cooperation, internationalism, and equality. I think you can create a better society if you put those values into effect.
How do you hope for these values to kind of materialize? What kind of policies do you hope to be adopted in the near future?
I suggest various different things, because it's quite a wide-ranging, it dips into loads of different things without going into huge detail about any. But I think we need a more empowering state. We need to have the idea of having a state that allows people to develop their full potential rather than seeing it as wholly bad, which the conservative view usually is. You need the smallest possible state, but I think we need an empowering one. I think we need an ethical taxation system. So I think people need to disapprove actively of those that try to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. I think we need things like wealth taxes, because at the moment in our system we have one of the most unequal distributions of wealth and income that we've had in our history, and it's getting worse. So I think you have to look at things like wealth taxes, closing the tax havens down so that people cannot escape by sending their wealth offshore, participating in the collective provision of goods and services like roads and a judicial system, but not paying anything.
So one fear with taxing wealthy people in a global economy is that they might just move their they might just give up on Britain and move elsewhere and pay taxes or not pay taxes elsewhere. Does that mean, what solution do you envision to that?
You have to have an international solution to the fact that large amounts of wealth now are being put offshore so people can escape their obligations to the countries that they live and work in. And I think we've got to stop that happening, and you can do that with international agreements to close some of these dark spaces down. And I think that people should, as citizens of a particular country, be proud to pay their fair share of taxes to enable provisions to be made for everybody. It's part of being a social being, and I think that human beings are social beings that have moral obligations to each other, not just their own selfish desires. And I think that's the difference, the philosophical difference between the Friedrich Hayek disciples and those of us who want a democratic form of socialism and more collective provision.
What do you hope for the future of the Labour Party now? It seems like we're at a crossroads.
I want us to be in government, putting some of these ideas into effect. I think that I'm a product of previous Labour governments. I was the first woman in my family ever to get the chance to go to university, and I went to Oxford. It gave me chances and opportunities that many working class people got because of previous Labour governments, and I want to see those chances and opportunities available to all, regardless of their social standing or wealth, in the future as well. I think by working together we can actually transform people's lives and prospects, and you do that in my belief with Labour governments.
And given that we've just found out the results from the European elections, what does that mean about Labour's position on Brexit?
First of all, I think Brexit is a profoundly reactionary thing. I think that those that push for Brexit are trying to create a circumstance where we separate from the European Union and all of the treaties that we've signed up to, which put a floor under workers' rights and environmental rights, so that we can have a kind of turbocharged Thatcherism on the edge of Europe. Well, this is a reactionary project that I don't think we should be supporting, and we've got to do our best to ensure that we mitigate the effects. So far we're in a situation where I think that we need a clearer position on how we move forwards. We've clearly fallen between two stools in the election results last night, which are extremely disappointing.
But some people want a turbo Thatcherism to come out of Brexit. Others just want a kind of sovereignty, right? The electorate of the Brexit party is not necessarily Thatcherite.
No, but the people that are driving it have got that agenda. And they told quite a lot of lies in the election, the original referendum. They said we'd get all this extra money for the NHS, and they did a very anti-immigrant kind of pitch. So they were trading on resentment and fear. I think obviously we can be sovereign, and we used to hold our own in a sovereign way in the way in which we dealt with our partners in the European Union. If you trade a bit of sovereignty, you can have a bigger effect on the global stage if you're talking about 250 million people rather than 60 million. So it's about how we amplify our global influence, and I think turning our backs on our nearest neighbours and somehow signalling that we don't want anything to do with them is not the best way to try to deal with some of the problems that the world is facing at the moment.
Final question. You entered politics as a young woman. What's your advice to young people thinking about going into politics now?
Well, I mean, you have to know why you're doing it, and that's not about, I don't think, a career. It's about remaking our society to fit the values that you share with others in whichever political party you're in. Obviously, women have a tougher time than men in the way that I think that they're treated by the media and all of that. But we've made huge strides in the 28 years I've been in Parliament. When I first was elected in 1992, there were only 60 women out of 650 in Parliament, and we've got a lot more than that now. So progress does happen, and I'd say try to be part of that change.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For more debates, talks and interviews, subscribe today to the Institute of Art and Ideas at IAI TV.